So what if the reason you just, can't stop fighting with your spouse, or why you feel agonizingly self-conscious walking into a party is because your eyes are physically betraying your secret intent?
Right, yeah.
Like, not figuratively, but physically betraying you.
It's a terrifying thought, honestly, but if you look at the physiological evolution of human vision, I mean, it's exactly what's happening.
Well,
You are constantly broadcasting your deepest moral aims to everyone around you, entirely by accident.
well, welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we are unpacking a really fascinating lecture that takes some of the oldest stories in human history, these ancient biblical narratives, and completely strips them of their theological baggage.
Yeah,
We're
totally.
looking at them strictly as psychological blueprints, because these aren't just old tales, right? They are incredibly sophisticated frameworks for understanding developmental psychology, neuroscience, and, well, how we actually navigate reality.
And we are zeroing in on one central, really startling premise today, which is the idea that human perception and action are intrinsically linked to our moral aim.
Okay, break that down for us.
So there's this persistent myth in modern culture that we view the world objectively. We think of our eyes like cameras.
Right, like we're just recording video.
Exactly. The assumption is that light hits the retina and your brain just passively records a neutral, objective reality, and then after the fact, you decide how to act on it.
But the developmental psychology framework we are dissecting today completely dismantles that, doesn't it? Like, the camera analogy is entirely dead.
Oh, completely dead. There is no such thing as passive perception. None whatsoever.
That's so wild.
I mean, think about the physiological mechanics of seeing. To look at a room, you have to physically act. You move your eyes, you turn your neck, you focus the lens.
You're actively directing your attention.
Yes, action requires a decision. You are constantly deciding to look at one specific thing at the expense of, well, a million other things. And every single decision about what to focus on is, at its core, a moral choice about direction.
Because to choose to look at object A instead of object B means that in that exact microsecond, you have decided object A is of higher value to you.
Exactly. You are constantly ranking the world.
Right. You're aiming up towards something you deem better, or you're aiming down towards something resentful or worse. But you are never, ever neutral.
And this is where the evolutionary biology of the human eye becomes just profoundly relevant. Let's look at the actual anatomy.
Okay.
Humans possess a highly visible, stark white sclera. That's the white part of the eye surrounding the dark iris.
Which, if you think about it from a basic survival standpoint, seems like a terrible evolutionary mutation.
Oh, it is a massive liability in the wild. If you look at almost every other primate or, predatory animals, their eyes are heavily camouflaged.
Like a gorilla has dark sclera.
Right. A lion wants to hide where it's looking, because if the prey knows where the predator is aiming, the prey escapes. If a rival knows what you desire, the rival exploits it. Camouflaged intent is the biological default.
But humans went the exact opposite route. We evolved this massive billboard on our faces that screams, here is exactly what I'm looking at.
Yes. And why? Because we are a hyper-cooperative species.
Right.
We survived not by hiding our intent, but by ensuring our tribe could track it. When we sit around a fire or across a dinner table, I need to know what you are focused on so we can collaborate.
But the terrifying flip side of that cooperative evolution is that your underlying motivation, your aim, is fully visible.
Exactly. Let's apply this to something almost everyone dreads, which is public speaking. Why is getting up on a stage so universally paralyzing for people?
Because it's terrifying.
Right, but it usually comes down to a misaligned aim. If you step onto a stage and your internal secret motivation is self-glorification, like if you are thinking, I need these people to think I'm brilliant, I need this to boost my career, you are treating that audience as an object.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They are merely a tool for your ego.
And because humans are hyper-tuned to track intent, the audience instinctively feels that, don't they?
Yeah.
They see it in how your eyes dart around, seeking validation rather than actual connection.
Precisely. Your eyes physically move differently when you are trying to extract something from a crowd versus when you are trying to give them something.
That is fascinating.
If your aim is self-centered, your physiological system registers the audience as a collective predator judging you. You become agonizingly self-conscious.
And in clinical psychology, there's virtually no distinction between extreme self-consciousness and misery.
None.
You stumble, you sweat, you fail.
But what if you flip the aim? Well, if you change your internal aim to, I have discovered a truth that I believe is valuable, and my only goal is to share it honestly with these people, your entire physiology relaxes.
Because you aren't extracting anymore. You're offering.
Exactly. Your gaze softens, your breathing regulates, and your performance transforms. Every look across a table on a first date, every glance during a tense negotiation, is broadcasting your ethical structure.
Which totally recontextualizes the oldest, dumbest joke in human history, honestly.
Oh, which one?
Why did the chicken cross the road?
Right, to get to the other side.
Yeah, but think about the underlying psychological assumption of that joke based on what we're talking about. The chicken only crossed because it assumed the other side was fundamentally better than the side it was currently on.
That's actually a great point.
It's a joke about directional action. Every time we move, every time we speak, we are that chicken. We are operating on the implicit belief that our action is taking us toward greener grass.
It's the perfect distillation of the concept. You don't move unless you believe the destination is an improvement. And how you define that improvement dictates literally everything you see along the way.
You know, I like to think of this like setting a destination in a GPS.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like when you open a map app, you don't look at a totally objective, equal value layout of the entire continent. The second you type in your destination, the app filters out like 99% of reality.
Right, it grays out all the towns, exits, and highways that do not serve your route.
Exactly. It only highlights the exact turns that get you to your goal.
Yeah.
Your brain does the exact same thing with reality.
That is a phenomenal analogy because the filtering mechanism of the brain, the reticular activating system, functions precisely like that.
Really.
Yeah. If your overarching destination in life is genuine connection, your brain will naturally highlight opportunities for empathy, shared humor, and vulnerability. Those exits will literally light up on your mental dashboard.
But if your destination is, say, revenge or protecting your fragile ego, your brain filters the world to serve that route, doesn't it?
Completely. You won't even see the person smiling at you. You will only see the person who cut you off in traffic.
Wow.
You will only hear the slight ambiguity in your partner's tone, and you'll interpret it as an insult. You literally blind yourself to anything that doesn't validate your resentment.
Which forces a radical, almost terrifying reevaluation of our daily lives, if you think about it. Like, think about the concept of bad luck.
Right.
Now, obviously, arbitrary tragedy exists. People get sick, natural disasters happen. But if you look at the chronic, repetitive miseries in your life, if you're constantly encountering betrayal, constantly being misunderstood, constantly failing in relationships, you have to ask a brutally uncomfortable question.
And that question is it really a string of incredibly bad luck, or is my GPS set to a destination that naturally routes me through toxic swamps and endless traffic jams?
Exactly.
If your misery is just fate, you are a passive victim. But if your misery is fundamentally tied to a misaligned aim, it means you actually possess the agency to change it.
You can recalibrate the destination.
Right. The world will literally reveal a different set of pathways to you if you change what you are aiming at.
Okay, but this raises a huge problem for me. If our aim defines our reality, what happens when we inevitably start off aiming at the wrong things?
Well, that's the human condition, isn't it?
Yeah, because none of us are born with perfectly calibrated moral compasses. We start out selfish, blind, and messy.
Which is exactly why the psychological framework we're discussing turns to the archetype of the flawed hero. Specifically, the story of Jacob in the book of Genesis.
Right.
Jacob is one of the most fascinating psychological case studies in ancient literature precisely because he is an absolute disaster of a human being at the beginning of his life.
Yeah, he is not the glowing, haloed saint you expect in the foundational myth. His name later becomes Israel, which means we who wrestle with God, but he starts out as this highly manipulative mama's boy.
He really does.
He's described as dwelling in tents, hiding behind his mother's favoritism, just completely avoiding the harsh realities of the world.
And he possesses a deeply Machiavellian streak. I mean, he leverages his starving, impulsive brother Esau's hunger to steal his birthright for a bowl of soup.
It's so messed up.
And then he literally dresses up in animal skins to deceive his blind, dying father into giving him the blessing meant for the firstborn. It is a profound portrait of familial psychopathology.
It's totally toxic.
Yeah.
But the framework argues that this toxicity is absolutely necessary.
Oh.
So why is it crucial that our archetypal heroes start out severely flawed?
Because if the only people capable of becoming agents of the ultimate good were flawless, enlightened beings from birth, These stories would offer zero hope for the rest of humanity.
Right, because perfection is alien to the human experience.
Exactly. The deep psychological realism of the Jacob narrative is its acknowledgement that true maturity doesn't begin from a state of pure, naive innocence.
It begins in the mud.
It begins in the mud. It begins when you look around and recognize the destructive, deceitful path you are currently on, and you make a conscious, agonizing decision to step into the unknown and aim up.
Which is what Jacob does.
Right. Jacob's deception makes his brother so murderous that Jacob has to flee into exile. He loses his mother, his wealth, his comfort. He is stripped down to nothing, sleeping with his head on a rock in the wilderness.
And it's only in that state of total deprivation that he decides to change his aim.
Yes. And here is where we get into the ancient mechanics of change. Long before we had clinical terminology, long before we could sit on a couch and talk about shifting our cognitive paradigms, ancient humans had to act these psychological concepts out physically.
Through the concept of sacrifice, particularly burnt offerings.
Exactly.
This completely shifted my perspective when I read the source material.
Yeah.
We look back at ancient altars and animal sacrifices as just primitive superstition, right?
We do, yeah.
But the psychological framework reveals it as a primordial conceptualization of a deep truth. If you are going to change, something has to die.
When you decide to aim up, you realize that your current self is insufficient for the future you want. But your current self doesn't want to leave.
Right, it's comfortable.
So you have to voluntarily burn off the dried up carcasses of your previous identity, your immaturity, your arrogance, your deceit, your reliance on your parents.
Wow.
You take something valuable to your old self, you place it on an altar, and you let the fire consume it. The smoke, the transformed essence of that sacrifice, rises upward toward the highest ideal.
It's the physical enactment of letting go of who you were so you can become who you need to be. Like, think about the psychology of having children today.
Oh, that's a great modern equivalent.
It forces this radical, highly visible maturity. When you become a parent, you have to sacrifice your absolute autonomy. You sacrifice your disposable income, your sleep, your selfish priorities.
You are practically burning your childhood on the altar of parenthood.
Exactly. Because suddenly a new life is more important than your comfort.
And we all know people who refuse to make that sacrifice. If you try to hold on to your immature bachelor pad self while attempting to raise a child, the psychological friction is disastrous.
Oh, it's terrible. You become resentful, the child is neglected, and chaos ensues.
You have to ascend to the new level of responsibility, which demands a literal sacrifice of the old self.
Wait, I struggle with this step, though. Let's go back to Jacob for a second.
Okay.
If I am fundamentally broken, deceitful, and immature, how can my aim be trusted? Like, how do you know what up is if you are starting from a place of total moral blindness? If I'm a liar, how do I even conceive of the ultimate truth?
That is the core paradox of human growth, and it's a brilliant question. The framework posits that even in our profound ignorance, human beings possess a deep biological instinct for what is incrementally better.
Incrementally.
Yes, you do not need to know what the ultimate, absolute, perfect good is to take the first step. You just need to know what the next best step is.
Like, I don't need to know how to be a saint. I just need to know that lying to my dad is bad, so I should probably stop doing that today.
Exactly. You aim up in keeping with the absolute limits of your current moral knowledge. It's a localized aim.
Okay, I follow that.
And the magic of human cognition is that the moment you take that first incremental step, the moment you sacrifice that one specific lie, your vision clears slightly. You gain a higher vantage point.
Oh, I see.
From that new plateau, you can suddenly perceive a slightly more sophisticated good that was totally invisible to you yesterday.
Which maps perfectly onto the turning point in Jacob's story. He's sleeping on a rock in exile, and he has this profound dream of a massive spiral staircase.
Right.
A ladder reaching from the dirt all the way into heaven, with angels ascending and descending.
Jacob's ladder. It is the ultimate visual representation of this psychological hierarchy of values. It represents the unending upward climb of human potential.
But the crucial question this framework asks is, what exactly is at the very top of that ladder?
And the answer given is that the highest good, which these ancient texts personify as God, is ultimately ineffable. It is fundamentally undefinable.
Which frustrates a lot of people. I mean, we want a clear definition. We want to know exactly what the finish line looks like.
Of course we do. But psychologically speaking, the highest good actually must remain undefinable for our own survival.
Why? If we can't define what the ultimate good is, aren't we just aiming blindly in the dark? How is that practically helpful?
To understand why, you have to look at the neurology of human motivation. How does the dopamine system work?
Okay, tell me.
We do not get our primary sense of meaning from simply possessing something. We get it from the pursuit of a goal.
Oh,
When
yeah.
you finally achieve a massive goal, getting the degree, landing the promotion, marrying the partner, you get a brief spike of satisfaction, and then immediately you feel a sense of emptiness. You think, what now?
A post-achievement hangover.
Right. Because you extracted the wisdom from that accomplishment, and that new wisdom demands a new, higher, more complex goal.
Oh, I see.
If the ultimate good were exhaustible, if you could clearly define it, reach it, plant a flag in it, and say, I'm done, life would end in static perfection. And a static state of perfection is indistinguishable from death.
Because there would be no more dopamine, no more pursuit, no more meaning.
Precisely.
This reminds me of how the framework contrasts this upward climb with the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to roll a massive boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down, and he has to repeat this forever.
Right.
It is the archetype of pointless, agonizing repetition. It's the daily grind where you feel like you're getting nowhere, like one damn thing after another.
But aiming at an ineffable, ever-receding highest good transforms that experience entirely. Because the highest good can never be fully grasped, life ceases to be a single hill with a boulder.
It becomes a sequence of ever higher mountains.
Exactly. You summit one peak, you beat the addiction, you fix the marriage, and as you stand on that peak, the mist clears, and you see an even higher, more beautiful peak in the distance.
It's exactly like playing a massive open-world video game.
How so?
Well, think about it. When you start a new game, the map is mostly covered in darkness or fog. You can only see the tiny starting village. But the moment you defeat the boss of that area, like the final boss of your current immaturity, the fog lifts.
Oh, I love that.
You don't beat the game and turn off the console. Instead, an entirely new continent of potential reveals itself. The map keeps expanding specifically because you aimed up and conquered your immediate limitations.
And as you navigate this endlessly expanding map, something profound happens to your own mind. The framework explores how the spirit of your aim, the underlying emotion of your goal, actually hijacks and informs your imagination.
This was easily one of the most chilling concepts we're unpacking today.
It really is.
Think about a time when you were viciously angry, like in the middle of a screaming fight with your spouse. If your aim in that exact moment is purely to win, to dominate them, to prove you are right at whatever cost to the relationship, your imagination immediately acts as a servant to that aim.
You are literally summoning the spirit of vengeance. And once invited in, it floods your brain with ammunition.
Yeah.
Your memory will suddenly supply you with an incredibly detailed list of their past mistakes from 3 years ago. Your linguistic centers will supply you with cutting insults perfectly tailored to their deepest insecurities. Your perceptions and emotions act as navigational markers, taking you exactly where you are aiming, which is mutual destruction.
It's terrifying because you didn't consciously sit there and think, I should bring up that thing they're insecure about. The thought just arrived. The spirit of your aim supplied the tactics.
Exactly. If you aim for destruction, your mind becomes a weapon.
But if you stop, take a breath, and change your aim to, I want to reconcile and build a peaceful home, your imagination instantly shifts. It suddenly starts supplying you with memories of why you love them, or words that de-escalate the tension.
You invite the spirit in, and it reveals its proclivities to you. This is why aiming or prioritizing a transcendent, unifying good over your baser egotistical instincts is a matter of psychological life and death.
So if the human ideal is this constant upward climb toward an ethical, ineffable good,
Yeah,
what happens when a society simply stops climbing?
that's a dark turn.
What happens when a culture decides that the raw base material reality is enough?
This is where the framework dives into the dangers of nature worship, using the historical narrative of the prophet Elijah, King Ahab, and Queen Jezebel.
Right.
Jezebel is infamous for introducing the worship of Baal to the Israelites, and Baal, at his core, is a nature god, a god of storms, fertility, and raw power.
Now, to a modern ear, nature worship just sounds like being eco-friendly or, hiking on Sundays.
Sure.
But historically, it was incredibly dark. The framework makes a strong claim here, associating ancient nature worship with the literal sacrifice of children and a fundamental prioritization of the raw awe of the natural world over human value.
And to understand why a society would devolve into this, you have to put yourself in the shoes of an ancient person encountering the absolute terror of the natural world.
It would be
A
terrifying.
massive thunderstorm, a volcanic eruption, a devastating flood, or just the endless expanse of the ocean. It is overwhelmingly easy to view nature as an all-powerful, capricious force that is vastly superior to humanity.
And if you elevate the power of nature above the value of the human soul, human life becomes cheap. It becomes expendable.
Yes. Why not sacrifice a child if it means appeasing the storm god and getting rain for the crops? The natural world is supreme. Humanity is just subservient biomass.
And this ancient dynamic maps perfectly onto what modern economists call the natural resource paradox.
That's a brilliant connection.
Have you ever noticed that some of the nations with the most massive abundance of raw natural resources, like oil, diamonds, rare earth minerals, are often devastated, corrupt, impoverished hellscapes?
Yes. You look at places with limitless underground wealth and the population is starving. Meanwhile, you look at a nation like Japan. Japan has virtually zero natural resources. It's an island constantly hit by earthquakes and tsunamis, and yet it is a hyper-rich, high-trust, thriving society. How does that make any sense?
Well, the framework argues that true abundance, even something as basic as clean drinking water, is not merely a natural occurrence. It is the byproduct of a society's ethical orientation.
It requires an ethos that places human value at the very top of the hierarchy.
Right. Japan thrives because its cultural ethos heavily emphasizes discipline, trust, mutual respect, and human ingenuity over raw material extraction.
So the argument they are making here is that infrastructure like building dams, moving rivers, maintaining water treatment plants so that children don't die of cholera is actually a profound moral achievement, not just an engineering one.
Exactly. When a society worships the raw, powerful forces of nature or power itself, it breeds tyrants who extract wealth and let the people suffer.
But when a society climbs Jacob's ladder and values the human ethical element, truth, care, and long-term investment, they can literally pull abundance out of barren rock.
This totally reframes The Lion King for me.
The Lion King.
Yeah, I love this analogy from the source material. Think about when Scar takes over Pride Rock. Scar is resentful, he worships power, he operates on pure ego and vengeance.
Right.
And what happens physically to the kingdom under his rule? It immediately suffers a devastating drought. The land dies. But when Simba, who has finally matured, sacrificed his carefree bachelor life and accepted the heavy burden of responsibility, takes the throne, the rains literally return.
It's an archetypal truth that mirrors the story of Elijah. Elijah has this massive public showdown with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. It's a contest of altars.
Right, the fire from heaven.
The prophets of the nature god pray for fire to ignite their sacrifice, and nothing happens. The raw forces of nature do not respond to their frenzied rituals. Elijah then takes it a step further. He literally soaks his altar in gallons of precious water, making it seemingly impossible to light.
And yet, the fire of Yahweh descends and consumes the altar, the sacrifice, and even the stones.
It proves the absolute superiority of the ethical aim over the worship of raw natural forces. And what happens immediately after this ethical victory?
Rain returns.
Exactly. The years-long drought ends. Once the ethical aim is restored, the society is nourished again.
But the psychology of Elijah immediately following this massive fiery victory is completely counterintuitive, isn't it?
It really is.
You would think he'd be riding high.
Yeah.
He just proved everyone wrong. But Queen Jezebel threatens his life, and Elijah completely breaks down. He runs away into the wilderness in despair and hides in a cave.
He is deeply depressed. He feels like he is the only ethical person left in a corrupt world. And while he is hiding in this cave, reality puts on a terrifying display.
Yeah.
A massive windstorm shatters the rocks, then an immense earthquake, then a raging forest fire. Given his recent victory with the fire from heaven, Elijah naturally expects the divine to speak to him through these awe-inspiring, world-shaking natural disasters.
But the divine is not in the wind. It is not in the earthquake. It is not in the fire. After all the chaos subsides, Elijah hears something entirely internal, just a still, small voice, a whisper.
The voice of conscience. The framework equates the magnitude of this psychological discovery to Socrates discovering how to think, or the invention of the scientific method.
It's a huge turning point.
This is the precise moment in human history where we realize that the ultimate moral compass isn't a booming, terrifying voice from a thundercloud. It isn't an external natural force. It's an internal, quiet intuition.
We really need to deconstruct how bizarre the conscience actually is, because we just take it for granted. The framework points out some incredible paradoxes. First, the conscience is quiet and non-compulsory. It doesn't force your hand.
It operates entirely on invitation. It will suggest you do the right thing, but it will never overpower your physical will.
You can totally choose to ignore it. You can drown it out with a six-pack of beer, or endless scrolling on your phone, or staying impossibly busy at work.
Yes, but here is the second most terrifying paradox. While you don't have to obey it, it is completely autonomous. You cannot control what it tells you.
Think about how weird that is. It's your brain.
Yeah.
If it is merely a part of your own neural circuitry, why can't you just negotiate with it?
Right.
If you do something awful to a friend to get ahead, why can't you just consciously say, look, I know that was shady, but it really helped my career, so let's just agree it's fine, and have your conscience completely on board?
Because the conscience induces shame and guilt when you betray your own potential, and you absolutely cannot flip a switch to turn that shame off.
No matter how hard you try.
You can rationalize your behavior to your friends, you can hire PR firms to spin it to the public, but at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, that autonomous voice will judge you, and you cannot stop it.
It's as if there's a roommate living in your head. It's your house, you pay the mortgage, but you cannot force this roommate to agree with your terrible decisions.
That's a great way to put it.
If you make a selfish choice, the roommate is going to sit on the couch and stare at you in profound, silent disappointment. Ignoring it is like putting a piece of black tape over the check engine light in your car. The engine is still tearing itself apart. You just refuse to look at the warning on the dashboard.
Because of this profound autonomy, because it acts as an internal judge that you cannot bribe, trick, or command, the framework argues it operates psychologically as the voice of the divine within the human soul.
Right.
It is the part of you that is allied with your highest possible future, constantly trying to steer you away from the abyss.
And the framework grounds this abstract, almost mystical idea in cold, hard evolutionary biology, specifically by discussing human mating strategies.
Right, let's look at the contrast between short-term, low-investment strategies and long-term, high-investment strategies in the animal kingdom.
Okay.
Some creatures, like mosquitoes or certain species of fish, have zero investment in their offspring. Reproduction is purely a numbers game. It's transactional. Lay 1,000,000 eggs, abandon them immediately, and hope 10 survive. The parents vanish.
And clinical psychology maps this exact biological pattern onto human behavior through what's known as the dark tetrad of personality traits: Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism, and sadism.
Yes.
These traits represent a parasitic, short-term approach to human interaction. It's the person who uses others for immediate gratification, extracts what they want, and vanishes, leaving a wake of destruction.
But humans, fundamentally, are the ultimate exemplars of the high investment strategy. Unlike a fish, a human infant is completely helpless for years.
Oh, helpless.
We require decades of intense, multi-generational investment, teaching, and protection to raise offspring successfully. This ethos of long-term commitment, trust, and self-sacrifice is deeply, undeniably wired into our biology and the foundations of our societal structures.
So imagine this scenario. You are generally a reliable, decent person. You are wired for that long-term investment, but you go to a conference, you drink way too much, and you decide to act out that short-term parasitic strategy.
Okay, following.
You compromise your integrity in your marriage for an exploitative, meaningless one-night stand. The physical gratification in the short term might be intense, but the next morning, your conscience absolutely tortures you.
It tortures you because you haven't just broken a social rule. You have betrayed your deepest biological and psychological instinct. The instinct to become a responsible, high-investment ancestor.
Wow.
The implicit structure of your aim, which naturally points toward love, responsibility, and long-term connection, recognizes that you have wandered drastically off the path and into the swamp. Your own soul lets you know you've violated the covenant of your highest potential.
So the conscience speaks, often uncomfortably, telling us exactly where we failed. But what happens when you hear that still, small voice, and you are so terrified of what it's asking you to do that you absolutely refuse to listen to it?
That's a very common reaction.
What happens when you run in the opposite direction?
This brings us to the psychology of refusal, perfectly captured in one of the most famous stories of the ancient world, the story of Jonah.
Now, most people know this as the guy swallowed by a whale story, like a kid's fable.
Right.
But psychologically, it is the ultimate exploration of avoiding your conscience. Jonah is commanded by this divine internal voice to go preach to the city of Nineveh. He is told to warn them that their corrupt behavior is leading to imminent destruction.
But Nineveh isn't just a random city that needs help. Nineveh is the capital of the mortal enemies of the Israelites. They are deeply hostile cultural enemies.
So it's dangerous.
Very. Jonah is being asked to go into hostile territory and speak the truth to people he fundamentally despises.
Jonah's reaction is entirely relatable, honestly. He thinks, they are my enemies, they deserve destruction. Why on earth would I risk my own life and reputation to go save them? So he refuses the call of his conscience.
Right.
He goes to a port, gets on a ship, headed for Tarshish, which represents the furthest known point on the map in the absolute opposite direction of Nineveh. And what does he do once he's on the ship? He goes down into the dark hold and falls fast asleep.
The psychology of the sleep is so profound. This isn't the sleep of the peaceful. It is the sleep of the damned. The framework compares it to Cain wandering into the land of Nod, which translates to the land of wandering or sleep, after murdering his brother Abel.
Or the disciples falling asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane when they should have been keeping watch.
Exactly. Jonah is sleeping to make himself unconscious to his moral failure.
And we do this all the time.
Oh, constantly.
Think about the guy who knows in his gut that he needs to break off a toxic relationship. His conscience is screaming at him to have the hard conversation. But instead of doing it, he goes home, drinks a six-pack of beer, smokes a joint, and plays video games until 3 a.m.
He is Jonah in the hull of the ship.
He is. He's using substances and distraction to drug himself into moral unconsciousness so he doesn't have to face the terror of speaking his truth.
But reality doesn't care that you are asleep. Your avoidance doesn't pause the consequences. While Jonah sleeps, a massive, chaotic storm rises and threatens to tear the ship apart. The pagan sailors on board realize someone has severely angered the structure of reality. They wake Jacob up, and he immediately knows he is the cause. He admits that he is running from his responsibility, and he tells them they have to throw him overboard. When they finally do, the storm immediately ceases.
The psychological lesson here is incredibly stark and, frankly, a massive burden. Refusing to speak your unique truth puts the entire ship in peril.
The framework notes that this ship can represent your individual soul, your family unit, your company, or even the entire state.
Okay.
The core premise is that every single person is uniquely positioned in time and space to observe a specific truth. If you see malevolence, corruption, or impending disaster, and your conscience demands you speak up, but you choose silence to protect your comfort, you are directly contributing to the sinking of the collective ship.
It's intimidating to think your individual silence could sink the ship of state. Most of us think, I'm just one person. What does my silence matter?
Yeah.
But let's look at this on a micro level. Isn't this exactly what happens in a toxic workplace or a dysfunctional family?
Entirely.
You have that one family member who clearly sees the elephant in the room. The father's creeping alcoholism, the mother's emotional abuse, the impending financial ruin. Their conscience is screaming at them to speak up and stop the madness.
But they stay silent.
Why? To keep the peace. But it's a false peace. And by staying silent, by letting the corruption grow unchecked, the entire family structure eventually crashes into the rocks.
The framework reinforces the disproportionate power of individual truth-telling by referencing another ancient negotiation, Abraham bargaining with God over the corrupt cities of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, right.
Abraham negotiates the divine down, eventually establishing a profound mathematical ratio. If there are just 10 righteous people in the city, 10 people willing to embody and speak the truth loudly, the entire corrupt metropolis will be spared.
10 people. Out of tens of thousands, the truth is vastly more powerful than a lie, but it requires a human voice to activate it.
But returning to Jonah being thrown off the ship wasn't the end of his punishment for running away. It wasn't just a quick death by drowning.
No, he is swallowed by a beast from the abyss and taken down to the very bottom of the earth, into the crushing darkness, for 3 days. The framework explicitly maps this as a descent into hell.
Because there are fates significantly worse than physical death? The framework argues that when a society is composed of individuals who consistently refuse to speak the truth, when everyone becomes a coward like Jonah, that society rapidly degenerates into totalitarianism.
That's a chilling thought.
Living in a state of totalitarian silence where everyone knows the system is entirely corrupt, where everyone knows the emperor has no clothes, but everyone is too terrified to say it out loud, that is a psychological hell on earth.
Wow.
Jonah's physical descent into the belly of the beast is the visceral manifestation of the psychological torment of cowardly silence.
You lose your soul before you lose your life. Jonah eventually submits to his conscience, is vomited onto the shore, and goes to Nineveh. And because he has literally been through hell, his words carry the undeniable, terrifying weight of absolute sincerity.
And the hostile city actually listens, changes its ways, and is spared.
Which proves the necessity of the upward aim in speaking the truth. Okay, so we must act and we must speak. We must aim up. But this raises a massive practical question, one that gets addressed in the Q&A portion of the lecture we're studying.
Right, the Q&A had some great insights.
How do we enforce this upward aim on ourselves and on our loved ones without becoming total tyrants? If I know the truth, why shouldn't I just force everyone else to follow it?
This is a phenomenal trap, and the framework addresses it by contrasting high discipline with self-tyranny. It uses the tragic end of the story of Moses to illustrate the extreme danger of forcing compliance.
Right. Moses is arguably the greatest hero in these texts. He spends 40 agonizing years leading the fractious Israelites through the harsh desert.
A literal lifetime of struggle.
At one point, they completely run out of water, the people start complaining bitterly, and the divine instructs Moses to take his staff and speak to a rock to invite it to yield water.
The staff is a symbol of living tradition, wisdom, and valid authority. But Moses, completely exhausted and deeply frustrated with his ungrateful followers, loses his temper.
He snaps.
He doesn't speak to the rock. He doesn't invite the miracle. He uses his authority as a weapon and strikes the rock with force. The water flows. But Moses' punishment for using compulsion instead of invitation is utterly severe. He is barred from ever entering the Promised Land.
After 40 years of suffering. It seems so harsh, but psychologically, it is a profound warning against the use of force, even when your goal is technically good.
Yes, exactly.
The framework argues you cannot use force, even on yourself. True discipline is not a crushing dictatorial superego screaming at you to be better. True discipline is an adherence to enabling principles. It's an invitation to play.
We see the failure of force vividly in clinical psychotherapy. If a therapist tries to impose a solution on a patient, even if the therapist's advice is 100% accurate, scientifically sound, and perfectly well-meaning, the patient will almost always exhibit psychological resistance.
Really? They'll fight it.
Oh, absolutely. They will unconsciously sabotage the treatment, skip appointments, or do the exact opposite of what was suggested.
Because human beings inherently value freedom.
Yeah.
If you try to force someone up Jacob's ladder at gunpoint, they will jump off the ladder just to prove they are free.
Precisely. The framework also points to the Tower of Babel as a precursor to this tyranny.
Oh, yeah.
The tower represents a society where technology and pure rational intellect are worshipped as the highest gods. It's an attempt to build heaven through sheer engineering and force, which inevitably leads to total chaos and the fragmentation of communication. They lose the ability to speak to one another.
The lecture makes a fascinating connection to modern smartphones here, describing them as the ultimate manifestation of this Tower of Babel dynamic, an all-seeing eye of technology that demands our constant attention and fractures our ability to communicate with the people sitting right next to us.
And the speaker tells a great personal anecdote about this.
Yes, he talks about being at lunch with his wife, and he was pushing his luck, constantly checking his phone, answering emails, making unnecessary calls. He was letting the technology tyrannize the shared moment.
Now, how did his wife handle it? She didn't snatch the phone out of his hand.
No.
She didn't use dictatorial force because she knew that would just cause an argument. Instead, she issued a boundary based entirely on a shared aim. She looked at him and said, "You can be with your phone, or you can be with me."
It's brilliant because she presented an invitation based on the implicit highest goal of their marriage, to connect and share a life together.
Exactly.
She simply highlighted that his current action was working in direct opposition to their shared aim, and she left the ultimate choice up to him. That is how you negotiate a shared vision without resorting to tyranny.
But it requires immense humility to accept that invitation. You have to realize you're acting like an idiot and willingly correct your course, which ties into another incredible point from the Q&A regarding the arrogance of youth.
Oh, this was good.
The speaker talks about how, when he was 13 years old, he arrogantly rejected the church and all traditional structures because they were so full of flaws and hypocrisy.
He describes this specifically as Luciferian intellect. Let's unpack that because it sounds intense, but it's a very common developmental stage.
Right. Around early adolescence, the prefrontal cortex undergoes massive development. Teenagers suddenly gain the capacity for complex, abstract thought. They can suddenly perceive the ideal.
And the moment they can see the ideal, They look around at their parents, their schools, their religious institutions, and they realize that all of these structures are deeply flawed and hypocritical, that they fall short of the ideal.
And the easiest, most arrogant defense mechanism for a 13-year-old is to tear down the system rather than take responsibility for it. You're all hypocrites, so I'm out.
That is the Luciferian intellect. It is the arrogant presumption that you are morally superior to thousands of years of human tradition simply because you have the cognitive ability to spot an imperfection.
It's toxic.
I love how the framework countered this arrogance. If you inherit a house from your grandparents and the roof leaks and the paint is peeling, you don't stand in the front yard cursing the house for being dilapidated.
Right.
You thank God you aren't freezing to death in the winter. You go to the hardware store, you pick up a hammer, and you fix it. If your conscience allows you to see the flaw in a system, whether it's your church, your family, or your country, you aren't being given that vision so you can stand above it in judgment. You are being called to fix it.
But fixing it, aiming up, speaking the truth, negotiating without tyranny, all of this requires immense voluntary effort. It is exhausting. And more importantly, it requires the willingness to face profound suffering, which brings the psychological framework to its culmination. The necessity of embracing the ultimate tragedy.
The framework presents the narrative of the Passion of Christ as the absolute, comprehensive psychological tragedy. Stripping away the theology, it represents the archetype of the highest ideal, fully descending into the brutal, unfair reality of flesh and blood and accepting the total despair of the human condition.
The lecture focuses specifically on the agonizing moment on the cross when Christ cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Right.
Psychologically, this is the moment of absolute crushing desperation. It is the feeling that all the good you ever did, all the truth you ever spoke, all the sacrifices you made were entirely for nothing, and the universe has abandoned you to torture.
I always struggled with this part of the story. If this is the ultimate hero, why is that moment of total doubt and despair necessary? Why not face death with stoic silence or absolute confidence?
Because it validates the totality of human suffering. If a psychological blueprint is going to help you reconcile yourself to the brutality of life and fate, it cannot hide from malevolence. It cannot promise a life free of tragedy. You have to welcome catastrophe with open arms. We see this clinically in somatic experiencing and trauma therapy. You cannot intellectualize away your deep pain. You have to descend into the flesh, feel the physical reality of the despair, and process it.
The framework also references the story of Job here, which is just relentless suffering. Job is a good, ethical man, and yet he has his family killed, his health destroyed, and his wealth entirely stripped away by arbitrary, unfair tragedy. Even his friends blame him for it.
But Job doesn't curse existence. He questions, he suffers immensely. But he maintains his faith in the essential underlying goodness of being despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
And the psychological principle operating here is ironclad. It has been proven by clinical therapists over the last century, particularly in exposure therapy. You do not thrive by hiding. You do not cure an elevator phobia by avoiding elevator.
Exactly. People who voluntarily confront what terrifies them do not necessarily become less afraid. The fear might still be there, but they become braver. They become capable of prevailing despite the fear.
It means that even the feeling that all your good efforts were for nothing, that exact moment of absolute crushing despair when you feel totally forsaken by the universe, is a necessary, inescapable part of the human adventure.
You aren't doing it wrong when you feel that way.
Exactly. You are right in the middle of the story. You are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, and the only way out is through.
By voluntarily accepting the catastrophe of life, by not running from the suffering, you transcend it. You burn off the final immaturities and prepare yourself for whatever renewal comes next.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. What this lecture ultimately presents is that our lives are a constant, unending navigation of aim. There is no neutral ground. Every single micro moment is directional.
Whether it is how your eyes physically track a date across a coffee shop table, whether you choose to negotiate with your spouse or tyrannize them with your anger, whether you speak up at a toxic workplace or go to sleep in the belly of the ship while the company sinks, every action is a moral choice.
You are either moving up Jacob's ladder toward a higher, more integrated version of yourself, which brings abundance and connection, or you are moving down into the abyss of resentment, silence, and chaos. But you aren't doing it blind. You are uniquely equipped with a conscience, that still, small voice, to guide you on this unending adventure.
It acts as your internal compass, torturing you when you act like a parasite, and recalibrating you whenever you step onto the path of your highest potential.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over, building on the profound autonomy of that internal compass. Think deeply about the concept of your conscience being something you absolutely cannot control. If you truly cannot force that voice to stop judging your bad actions or demanding more of your potential, what does that say about where your thoughts actually come from?
It touches on the deepest mystery of human consciousness. Are we generating our thoughts or are we receiving them?
The next time you feel that sudden ping of guilt or that quiet, terrifying nudge to speak up in a room full of cowardly silence, ask yourself, if my ego didn't generate this thought, who or what did? And more importantly, what happens to my reality tomorrow if I actually have the courage to listen to it today? And when you finally make that choice, remember to pay very close attention to what your eyes decide to focus on next.